Symbiosis is any close relationship between two organisms. There are three main types. The first one is mutualism. Mutualism is where both organisms get something good. It's a plus plus relationship. The second type is commensalism. Commensalism is where one is helped and one is unaffected. So that would be like a plus zero relationship. And parasitism is where one is helped, but one is hurt. That would be a plus minus. The boxer crab and sea anemone have a symbiotic relationship. The boxer crab is very small and can't really defend itself very well with its tiny claws. So it goes around and collects little pieces or little baby sea anemones and uses those to ward off predators. So it has them in its little claws, almost like a cheerleader holding pom poms. And what happens is when something comes to eat the boxer crab, it shoves the sea anemone into that predator's face. Now, why does that matter? Because sea anemones are related to jellyfish. And just like jellyfish, they can sting. So the boxer crab is using the sea anemone's ability to sting to help protect it. The sea anemone is held in the crab's claws, and it will eat any of the crumbs and things from what the crab is eating. So it's kind of like your dog that you feed under the table. So the crab is using the sea anemone to protect itself, and the sea anemone is using the crab to get food. Brown-headed cowbirds have a couple of different relationships. So the first one we're going to talk about is the brown-headed cowbird and bison. Bison, another word for them is buffalo. So the cowbird and the buffalo live in the Great Plains. And the cowbird will ride on top of the buffalo, and it will pick off all of those little biting flies and mosquitoes and ticks, and it eats them. But the cowbird also has a different type of relationship with little songbirds. And when I say songbirds, I mean like small birds that sing, like warblers, or around here we have things like cardinals, just smaller birds that sing. And the cowbird will lay its eggs in the nests of these songbirds. And the songbird chick, when it hatches, it's much larger than the baby songbirds. And it actually just shoves the other baby birds out of the nest. Unfortunately, the baby birds don't survive the fall. But the songbird parents don't understand that the cowbird chick is not really their baby because they take care of anything that hatches in their nest. So the songbird parents focus all of their attention into feeding and raising the cowbird chick. A horsehair worm and a cricket have a symbiotic relationship as well. The horsehair worm, as an adult, it lives in these puddles and it lays its it lays its eggs in the water. Eventually, the puddle dries up and the adult worms die, but the eggs are left. And as the puddle dries up, usually grass comes up through the puddle, and those eggs are left stuck to those little blades of grass. Crickets love to eat grass, so they are just munching along, and sometimes they accidentally swallow a horsehair worm egg. The worm egg hatches, and the horsehair worm lives inside of the cricket until it gets almost ready to be an adult. Once it's ready to be an adult, it actually takes over the cricket's mind and it forces the cricket to go drown itself in a puddle. And once the cricket has drowned itself in a puddle, it eats its way out of the cricket and swims around in the puddle. And it meets other horsehair worms and it finds a mate and it lays eggs. And the whole cycle starts again. A remora is a little fish that has a special type of skin on the top of its head that allows it to stick to things. They can actually stick to boats, but they usually stick to other fish. They're often found sticking to sharks, and sharks are carnivores. And because they don't have hands, they're pretty messy when they eat other fish. So there's usually little fish bits floating around in the water. And once the shark has eaten the fish, the remora sort of detaches itself and it swims around and it eats those little floating fishy bits. And then once they're both done, it reattaches to the shark and the shark swims away. The Nile crocodile is a huge crocodile and it lives in rivers and sometimes other like still bodies of water like lakes. And sometimes the water isn't really the cleanest, like there's leeches and other parasites. And then, you know, crocodiles don't have hands, so they can't floss their teeth. Sometimes when they eat something, a prey animal, meat from that prey animal can get stuck in their teeth. And if it's left there, it can cause an infection. So if you've ever been to a dentist with a cavity, you know that if you get an infection in your teeth, it's really pretty bad. So when a crocodile has dirty teeth or parasites in its mouth, it will go up onto the riverbank and open its mouth. Once it's there, this little tiny bird called an Egyptian plover hops on over. It actually gets inside of the crocodile's mouth and it cleans everything out. If it has meat stuck between the teeth, it'll pluck that out and eat it. If there's leeches or other worms, it'll go ahead and pull those off and eat it. And once the bird is done, it just walks out of the crocodile's mouth and finds another crocodile whose teeth need cleaning. And then the crocodile closes its mouth and goes back into the water. There are little things called pseudoscorpions. Remember that pseudo means false. And these little scorpions have tiny, tiny legs, but no stinging tails. They can't get very far very fast on their own, so they hitch a ride on any passing insect that won't eat them. So if it's a large fly like the one in the picture, it just hangs onto a leg. Sometimes they hang on to beetles' legs. And then when they get to a new place, they just drop off, find some food, and then when they want to move on again, they'll find another passing insect and hang on to where that insect goes next. So, bumblebees are relatively large bees, and the bottle ginseng is a really neat little plant. So, normally the flowers, which are on your screen here, normally the flowers of plants will open up and bloom and have petals. The bottle ginseng doesn't do that. All the flowers stay closed. The bumblebees are really the only bees large enough to get to the pollen and nectar inside of those flowers. The bumblebees use the pollen and nectar as a food. So the bumblebees find the bottle ginseng and it just rips open that closed flower and eats all of the pollen and all of the nectar. And the bottled ginseng is pollinated in the process. So it can make little baby bottled ginsengs. It'll make seeds. So we all know that termites eat wood, but they can't actually digest the wood by themselves. Inside of their tummies, there's a little one celled organism, and that little tiny organism is called a protist. And these protists are able to break down wood and digest it so that the termites can get the energy from it. So these little protists, they just live in the termite's tummy. They get all the food they can eat. And the termites can eat something that nothing else can digest. So they have an exclusive food source. The honey badger is really one of the toughest animals out there. And it gets its name because it really likes honey. It has a hard time finding bees' nests, though, or beehives. But that's where the little honey guide comes in. The honey guide can spot a bee and it will actually follow that bee to find out where its hive is. And then once it's figured out where the hive is, it sort of sings this special song. And that will call any honey badger in the area because that song is basically the bird getting on a loudspeaker screaming, "Hey, I found a beehive." So the honey badger comes running, and the honey badger rips into that beehive. And the bees are really upset, so they're stinging. The honey badger can take, lots and lots and lots of bee stings and not be affected at all. That many bee stings would really hurt the little honey guide. Eventually, the rest of the bees realize that they can't make the honey badger leave, so they all leave and make a new hive somewhere else. The honey badger eats itself into a food coma, and it just basically stuffs its face and then wanders away. The honey guide will come after and it will eat everything that it can. It will eat some of the honey.
Just a friendly reminder that we have a faculty meeting at 11 o'clock in the cafeteria. See everybody then.
The little honey guide will eat itself into a food coma too. It eats everything that it can. And then once both of them are hungry again, the whole process starts over where the honey guide will go find another bee's nest and it will holler for a honey badger to come help it out. Orchids are really pretty flowers and plants, but they don't live on the ground. Where they live, it's actually really dark on the ground because the trees have these huge leaves and it covers the top of the forest where it's actually kind of dark at the bottom of the trees at the forest floor. So, in order to get sunlight, these plants live or grow on the sides of these trees. However, it doesn't really dig in to the tree bark. It just sort of glues itself on the side of it and it just gets more sunlight and it lives its life and it just goes on its merry way. And the tree just has this little plant stuck to it and it's like, okay. And the tree just does its thing and continues to grow and live. On the other hand, there are also other plants that do dig into tree bark. So, mistletoe is the plant that at Christmas time most of us hang above doors where you're supposed to get kissed under the mistletoe. But they grow in oak trees. And they have these special little root things that sort of dig into the bark and they suck all the nutrients out of the oak tree. Nudibranchs and jellyfish or sea anemones. Remember that jellyfish and sea anemones are related and they can both sting you. A nudibranch is a little slug like thing that lives in the ocean and it eats jellyfish and sea anemones sometimes. But then something neat happens. The nudibranch can actually use those stinging cells from jellyfish or sea anemones to grow its own stinging tentacles. That would be like us eating a hamburger and growing bull horns. Leafcutter ants are really well known for going around and chopping down lots and lots of grass, and they'll cut off leaves of plants and they cut it up into little pieces, and then they carry all those little pieces back to their nest. Once they're in their nest, they don't eat the plants that they just collected. They don't eat any of the leaves or any of the grass. What they do is they chew it up into like this paste and they spread it around on this fungus. This fungus is not found anywhere else in the world, only in the ant's nest. And eventually, that fungus will send up these little mushroom kind of things to reproduce. Just like we eat mushrooms, this fungus has little mushroom type things. And the ants will go around and collect all of the little baby mushroom type things, and that's what they eat. But the fungus itself isn't really hurt, and the ants take care of the fungus, kind of like a farmer will take care of an apple tree.